This short film has been produced for couples considering egg or sperm donation treatment. Donor Conception Network supports families with children conceived with donor sperm, eggs or embryos, as well as those considering treatment. Good morning, Walter and Olivia. I'd like to welcome you to Cork Fertility Centre and thank you for taking the time to talk to us today about Donor Conception Network and your own experiences as parents of donor-conceived children. Firstly, can you tell us a little bit about Donor Conception Network?
Well, we set the network up along with 5 other families who were also interested in telling their children, because 20 years ago when the network was started, the received wisdom on the whole was that you didn't tell your children about how they were conceived. We'd all thought that that was probably the right thing to do. But then what we realized was that the most important thing for people who were planning to go down this route was to be in touch with other people who'd already done it. And that was really what they wanted to do, to meet other people, to talk to them, to feel that they weren't isolated. Because when people get into this situation where donor conception is the route they're going to have to take, people often feel very isolated and feel that this is not a subject they can talk to anybody else about. They want to find out about it as much as they can before they start talking to other people. And so they want to do that privately in some way that allows them to really understand what donor conception might be for them, and then to be able to move on and talk to other people, to talk to their children. And from that, I suppose, we discovered that there was a very wide interest in this, so that now 20 years on, I think we're probably the lead organisation in the world, really, and we're the only organisation that has the sort of resources and the capacity to talk about this. But we have about 1,500 member families, mainly from the UK, but spread across the world.
What is the most rewarding aspect of your work?
The most rewarding aspect, undoubtedly, is bringing people together. Just breaking that isolation that Walter was talking about. Seeing people come to our national meetings, as I hope will happen today in Cork, and looking very anxious as they come in through the door and with their shoulders high and their brows furrowed, and leaving at the end just looking relieved and pleased, and knowing that there are others out there who are facing the same questions and the same issues that they are.
How easy is it to empathise with the couples that you meet?
Well, we've been there. We have 2 sperm donor conceived children now in the second half of their 20s. So there was real empathy from us and an understanding. I mean, we were lucky in that we conceived fairly quickly, well, in fact, on the first time with the first child, but not until the 5th insemination for the second. So, you know, we knew the feelings that they had been through and knew how hard that they can be to deal with.
I think it was particularly helpful for me to be able to talk to other men who had had some of the similar feelings that maybe I'd had as well, to say, okay, I'm an infertile man, you know, are you in the same boat as me? And actually that can be quite a big icebreaker for a lot of men to actually to acknowledge that that's where they are. Those words don't come very easily to a lot of men, and so just even saying those words is actually quite an icebreaker. And then to be able to say, okay, what does that mean? Or how do you feel about it? And are you going to be able to move forward from some of those feelings, and then to integrate all that into a family life?
How did you arrive at the decision to tell your children about being conceived through donation?
It's hard to know now, 30 years later, exactly how we did arrive at that decision. But I think it seemed very clear to us right from the beginning that honesty was the right thing to do, that it felt like it would undermine trust in our family. If there was this lie somehow at the heart of the family, that we were deceiving our children into thinking that they had a genetic connection to Walter that they didn't have. It's very confusing for medical histories. But also we know that if the truth comes out later in life, then donor-conceived adults, and we're always reminding people that you can't just think about babies and small children when you're talking about donor conception. You've got to think about stroppy teenagers and adults as well. That they feel as if their world has fallen apart if they learn later. And so although it seems very odd, telling early is the easiest route.
How old were your children when you told them, and how did they react to the news?
Well, they were probably, well, they were certainly under 5, and they were about 3 or 4 when we started telling them. But telling them is not the only thing you have to do. It's important to keep this subject going. So it's not a matter of sitting the children down one day and saying, right, I've got something to tell you, and then never mentioning the subject again. Actually, you tell children when they're young, they don't quite understand what this really means, of course, but you need to carry on reinforcing it by not allowing this subject to go under the carpet. So you find opportunities to mention it from time to time again, to make sure that it's still there. And of course, as the children get older, they begin to understand what the implications of this are. Penny drops, and a bit more understanding comes out as to what, so this means that, right, okay, yeah, got it. So it's a process. It's not a single action. It's something.
It's never a single event. It's always a process over time. And an awful lot of people start with one of these little books that we have developed in DC Network. This happens to be the one for families with children conceived by egg donation, but we have them for many different families. People feel comfortable with starting with a book like this. It fits in a child's library of storybooks, and because it starts with with a child saying, this is my book. This is a picture of me. Of course, children love books that are actually about them, and so they often choose it.
Did you have any fears or worries as a couple about telling them?
I don't think we had worries about telling them. We had concerns, and I think everybody does, about exactly what the children themselves were going to do with this information, and how far they were going to spread it about, and were they capable of understanding that this is information that was perhaps not a secret, obviously, because we told them, but it was the sort of information that is private, in the sense that you don't necessarily tell everybody immediately in the supermarket or in the playground. But actually children do seem to absorb that distinction reasonably readily. Not all children. Some children are a little bit more find that concept a bit more tricky, but actually this is not the only kind of information that children or within families that children recognize that kind of distinction, that there are some things that you talk about within the family, about other family members, or that you don't necessarily talk to other people about. So it's kids do pick up that.
But we've also noticed over time that mostly young children either don't talk about it at school, or if they do mention it, then it is not understood by their friends. And because of that, it's boring and not interesting. And so the children change the subject. In fact, our personal experience in that our daughter did this, and other people's experience is that children might mention it at school after the age of 8 or 9, which is the kind of age when the penny does drop about what's going on. And then it can be helpful if teachers know about it as well, so that they're able to support a child if they choose to mention it at school.
Are you involved with schools and advising teachers about dealing with these issues?
We wish we were. It's one of the potential growth areas for DC Network, but we do know that a lot of DC Network members take the storybooks into school and show them to teachers, and some schools have bought sets of books to have around for donor conception children, because certainly in the UK there's no school that doesn't have children who are conceived in this way.
Couples often ask, why tell your children about being born through donation if they can never meet their donor?
Well, I think I'd turn that back and say, if the children were able to meet the donor, would that make it more important that they should be told rather than not? I think actually children need to be told these facts about their own identity, their own genetic makeup, and what the truth is, regardless of whether or not they're able to make any contact or find any information out about their donor. That really doesn't make any difference to the equation. The equation is that there is something that is personal to them, some knowledge about them and their own personality, their own makeup, which is relevant that they should know. And it's quite a big decision for donor conception parents to go down this route. It's not as if this is a tiny thing that it could be forgotten almost. This is pretty central to their being. So I think we think that is something that is absolutely right to be shared. And it's a bit of a red herring as to whether or not they can find out more about their donor. That's may happen or may not.
And personally, our own children being conceived so long ago, we know absolutely nothing about their donors whatsoever. And they feel very respected for having been told. And one is a bit curious and would be quite interested. The other one, to be honest, isn't in the slightest bit interested at all.
What would you say to parents who feel that telling the child is burdening them with information and making them feel different?
Yes, this is an interesting one, and I think these are feelings that are coming from a parent. They don't belong to the child. Parents get very worried about it because it is revealing that for them, donor conception is bad news. Now, I believe that donor conception is not bad news, it's just information. And that's how children conceive of it as well. And if they are raised by parents who are confident and comfortable with the decisions that they've been able to make about having their child that way, and they are able to communicate that confidence in talking with a child, then there is no reason on earth why that child should feel bad about having been conceived that way. In fact, interestingly enough, many of them feel rather proud and enjoy the sense of difference.
How can we help children to cope with the fact that they don't know their full genetic makeup?
I think children can understand that this is something that they won't. There is a part of the story that they won't actually be able to connect with, but at least they will know everything there is to be known. If the legal setup is that the children will not be able to find anything out about the donor, then that's the legal setup. That's the route the children and the parents have chosen. That's the route that's only the only route that may be available to them. It's the only route that was available to us at that time. The situation is slightly different in the UK now, but the most important thing is that the parents tell the children what they do know, and that there isn't some large piece of information which is being held from them as a great big secret that's having to be kept, and can become later on for some parents, and we know of some parents who've felt this to be a huge burden as their children grew up and grew into teenage years and started asking all sorts of difficult questions. And when television programs were on about inheritance and inherited characteristics, and the parents feeling just that there was a moment of horror that the children might suddenly turn around to them and say, well, this doesn't fit with me, or with that suddenly the truth might have to come out, and the parents just feeling this huge burden. And we know a number of circumstances where the parents have had to tell their children when they were teenagers or in their 20s, for different reasons, but it has had to happen, and they felt terrible about this burden of secrecy that they were going to have to they were going to have to make this big revelation. And by goodness me, it was a big revelation then. If you tell someone in their 20s that the whole of this, of their vision about their parents and their family has contained something completely different than they imagined.
A common dilemma is whether or not to tell family and friends. How should you tell them, and when should you break the news?
Yes, this is a big issue for a lot of people, and we have it constantly on the agenda in DC Network. In fact, I'm currently writing some further literature just about this very topic. I think a principle is, if you are telling children, then some other people have to know as well. You cannot tell a child in isolation. Close friends and family need to know, because if a child talks about the nice man who helped Daddy by giving us some sperm, or the nice lady who helped by giving some egg, you don't want Granny or Auntie Susan to look shocked and distressed and upset, or even accuse the child of lying. So they do need to know. Our experience is that the sooner you tell people, the better. Now, you might not want to do it before there is established pregnancy, simply because when you're going through treatment, a lot of people find it easier if they maybe share the information with a sister or a mother or a good friend, just for a bit of support. But to have loads of relatives constantly ringing you up or emailing you, asking what's going on, can be added pressure. But once there is an established pregnancy, then that is often a very good time to do it, simply because it then gives relatives and friends the rest of the pregnancy time to adjust to the idea and to do some catching up. Because the couple will be very knowledgeable about what's gone on for them, and they will have found out lots of things, but it may be completely new for the relatives and friends.
And of course, when that baby is born,
Yes.
What's going to be the first thing that these friends and family are going to say? Doesn't he look like you? hasn't he got your nose? Oh no, I don't think he's not going to, and he's got your nose. Whatever. I mean, that's what people do. You can't stop them. It's the only thing they can do. After all, what do you do? What do you do when you see somebody else's baby? So
we are all programmed to do it.
We are, because it's, you have to admire the baby, and then you have to say something. That's, if you haven't prepared yourself for that, it's going to hit you right in the eyes. And so it's really important to have thought about that. What are you going to say to people? It's also very important to be, I think, at some point telling the friends and family, and to identify which are the friends and the family members, if there are family members who really can't be told for one reason or another, and actually they live a long way away and they're perhaps not going to be in touch anyway. But we do know that some people find it a real block to be telling their children, because they haven't told their family members, and they're finding it very difficult to get around to telling the family members, so they delay telling the children. And then time has gone on, and the time keeps going on, and the children get to 5 or 6 or 7, and they still haven't told the children, because they haven't really been able to make that breakthrough telling the friends and family. Actually, telling the friends and family is more difficult than telling the children. Children aren't shocked by this information if they're tiny or if they're relatively young. They don't understand the implications. Friends and family have a very quick uptake on what's going on here, and they can understand it. And so they need to be brought into the picture at a time when the parents are ready to do that and feel strong enough to do it and are prepared to do it.
And ideally, that is in pregnancy or sometime in the first year.
Olivia and Walter, again I'd like to thank you on behalf of Cork Fertility Centre for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today.
It's been great.
It's been great. No, thank you very much.